Doctor, it's September 15th, 2015. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Ed.
We've had some development since our last show over at Del Mar, and I'd like to address those. Let me give you a little chronology, and you were there, so you know about it. But there were two instances during the budget approval process, that I got up for a 3-minute presentation.
Right.
The first time I took in what was essentially schedules from their audited financial statements. In fact, these schedules are printed in what is called Del Mar College's award-winning comprehensive annual financial reports. So these are award-winning reports, and they contain their audited financial statements.
So that's what the CAFR means?
Yeah, it is. It is.
Okay.
And that they win awards off that thing, so
And that's the one they pay the dues for?
that is true.
Okay.
That Canadian operation that I'd never heard of that issues awards. But I used their numbers, see, right out there, their financial statements, and I've got their schedules attached here. And so the first presentation I said, based on this information plus what Mr. Johnson said about generating $7.2 million in surplus this year, the college has generated since 2005 $73 million of revenue in excess of expenses.
Mm-hmm.
And that's substantiated by their schedules here. Year by year it tells how much they generated. And when I finished, Dr. Sloan got up, he's the CFO. He's CFO without an accounting course from what I can see. He got up and explained that they need the surpluses and explained some of the uses they had for surpluses.
Right.
Which it was an interesting discussion, and Dr. Escamilla participated in that as well, but that had nothing to do with what I was talking about.
Right.
I was talking about revenue in excess of operating expenses that basically generates a net income on an annual basis. So they had an interesting discussion that was completely irrelevant, but I don't think anybody in the board really noticed that, except possibly Mr. Watts. Mr. Watts said during that meeting that he would like to hear, well actually he said that the next meeting, he'd like to hear what the CPA had to say. The next meeting, I went in and Mr. McCampbell set the 3-minute clock that time.
Yeah.
I explained that what I addressed the prior week was not what Dr. Sloan and Dr. Escamilla rebutted about.
Mm-hmm.
I said it was an interesting discussion, but it wasn't what I was talking about. And during the last 11 years, the budget was wrong, materially incorrect, 91% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think they appreciated what I was saying, but I was using their numbers. And I did notice that the budget started getting, well, the excess, which would be called net income in a normal company. In about 2010, it started exploding, getting really dramatically huge, like 8-digit figures for 3 years in a row, over $10 million each year.
Right.
I said, you know, I think something changed in 2010. And my correlation was Dr. Sloan took over as CFO.
Right.
And I noticed that the SACS report, the accreditation agency,
Mm-hmm.
they had some concern about his lack of experience. So I said, history has now confirmed what they predicted.
Right.
And I think I'm right on that.
Yeah.
I think history has confirmed that. And then the final meeting, Dr. Sloan got up. I was not able to attend, but I was watching it I actually watched it on the internet on a delayed basis. They posted it.
Right.
And he got up there and said there was some misinformation disseminated, and it sounded as if he was talking about the things I had presented.
No joke. I
Yeah.
watched it.
Yeah, but
I was there.
I was giving his information.
Right. Well, he essentially said that what you have analyzed and so forth was in total error.
Oh. be his audited financial statements.
Mhm.
I hope he didn't mean that.
Well, what he meant was, he said, no, we did not have a surplus of $73 million.
Well, now,
And I, you know, you can't have a surplus if you go around and spend some of it.
I think he's
on-
talking about after he spent it.
Yeah,
Right, and here, he generated the surplus, which is what I was addressing.
right. That's exactly.
They generated a surplus, and actually they did a restatement, so it ends up, it's about 68 million rather than 73 million. So I think that's materially close enough.
Yeah.
So they generated $68 million of surplus revenue over operating expenses from 2005 to 2015.
Mhm.
So $68 million, and you can see that in, this is a supplement to their audited financial statements. I've given you
Mhm.
a copy there.
Right.
It's actually statistical supplement 19, and that's very concise. It says income before extraordinary item and increase in net asset position. Now, if we call increase in net asset position what you would call it in a for-profit corporation, that term would be net income.
Right.
And people understand net income. They don't understand increase in net position. So let's just call it net income, because in a regular corporation, that's what it would be.
Right.
In 2014, it was 10,427,000.
Mhm.
In 2013, it was 11 point, almost 3 million.
Mhm.
In 2012, it was 11.6 million. In 2011, 7.6 million. In 2010, 6 million. 2009, 5.2 million. You see the trend there.
Oh, yeah.
And
It's going
then, if you look at the net position, which is way down at the bottom of the page,
Mhm.
that's actually would be referred to in a for-profit corporation as equity. Now a not-for-profit is not going to have any equity.
Right.
Okay, so if we just refer to this as equity, in 2005, the college had equity of 56 million, 56.8 million.
Mhm.
In 2014, 117.7 million.
You see?
So it's the same increase that I've been talking about. If you, in 2015, if they come in with the $7.2 million that Mr. Johnson was predicting, it would be an increase from 2005 to 2015 of 68 million,
Right.
which is exactly the number I said in my first and second presentation over there, which Dr. Stone said was misinformation, which I took off their audited financial statements. Actually, it was the schedules attached to the college award-winning comprehensive annual financial reports. And if we go through these schedules, we can see Schedule I, which is basically, it says total primary government net position. Well, who in the world is going to understand that term?
Right.
So we'll call that net worth.
Okay.
And if you see at the bottom of that schedule, it ties in with the net worth in the previous schedule.
Mhm.
So the numbers are their numbers, they all tie together. Now, this was all done during a period when, and I have other schedules in here from their financial reports that show the total revenue, total expenses, and what amounts to a net income every year with the exception of 2008, which was a minor loss,
Mhm.
very minor loss. So we've got a $68 million increase in basically equity during this time when the professors were told there was a budget crisis.
Mhm.
And the result of the budget crisis was there's no raises for the professors. From 2008 through 2014, I believe in fiscal year 2015, the professors were given a 2% raise.
Yeah.
So we've got basically 6 years with zero raise because of the budget crisis. Okay, I'm trying to find the budget crisis. I've not been very successful. In fact, let's just go back and look at the cash position. And,
What page is that one?
well, if we go back to page 9,
Okay.
we'll start we're gonna start by saying the budget crisis must have occurred beginning in 2008, because that's when no raises were given.
Right.
So on page 9, we have the balance sheet at 2008. Now, we know from the other schedules that revenue exceeds expenses for operations, and the college is generating what amounts to a net income, which increases equity. So, you would think, there's some reconciling items, but you would think, hey, we're generating cash too, unless we go out and buy 95 acres. And that's a use of cash, which is not going to detract from the net worth, because that's going to exchange one asset for the other.
Okay.
So we still have the net worth. So in 2008, the professors were told there was a budget crisis. At the very top line, I've highlighted a number there. Can you read that?
Very top line,
Yeah.
$48,789,384.
Yeah, that would be the cash balances. Okay, so we're starting out the year, or we're finishing up the year, with $48.8 million in cash or cash equivalents.
Right.
So, and we generated a net income in that year. In 2008, the net income was, well, I'm sorry, we had a loss that year, 1.2 million.
Oh, okay.
So they lost a minor loss that year. So they ended up the year with 48 million. Okay, let's go to page 8. And that shows 2009 there. And we've got a little breakout of the cash because they've restricted some of it. So let's just look at the top line, which would be probably the unrestricted cash, that which the college can actually use. So in 2009, we're still under the budget crisis because no raises have been issued. And in 2009, we have generated $5.248 million of basically net income. And whoa, that looks like $26 million in cash to me.
Yeah, that's what it says.
That's pretty substantial for having a budget crisis.
Yeah.
No raises given. And so that increased in 2010 to $27 million. And in 2010, that was when we were starting to really kick this net income thing. We got $6.097 million in net income and increased our cash balances. Now there are restricted cash balances as well, but we're just looking at the cash and cash equivalent, which is probably unrestricted. 27 million in 2010.
So,
No raises. We're still under a budget crisis. Okay, well let's go to page number 7, and you'll see in 2011, when we're still under the budget crisis, that and no raises have been issued, and I believe they were cutting back on staff at that time. Now, in 2011, what would be the equivalent of net income for a standard corporation is $7.6 million. And we've bumped up our cash position a little bit there. Looks like 35.4 million to me.
yeah.
35.4 million. How interesting. No
Well, you know,
raises.
the thing is, it wasn't just the faculty without raises, it was the rest of the crowd. That was college-wide.
Where's the crisis?
I don't know, if I had that kind of money, I wouldn't be in a crisis situation.
I mean, that's after buying fixed assets. All right. They're generating net income.
Yeah.
So they've got discretionary funds, which they can go out and buy 95 acres of land with and still have millions and tens of millions of dollars in cash. Tens of millions.
Well, you know what I want to find out, and I may be all wet with this, but I want to find out if there is a quote, and they don't like the term surplus, okay? And then they go out and buy, let's say, 95 acres and $6.8 something million. I would think that the board would have the backbone and the wherewithal to know who put them there as a board member, to have the citizens vote on that. That's a big pot full of money.
Well, now, you and I were at the board meetings that led up to the approval of the budget, and I didn't get a real good comfort level that the board members actually understand these financial
I
statements.
don't think they do.
I know we've got one MBA on there, and he said in the last meeting that he had checked Dr. Sloan's numbers, and he agreed with them. And they may well have been correct, but they weren't the ones I was talking about.
Right.
So, that's almost completely irrelevant. I'm driving a Chevy and the guy changes oil in a Ford and says, I'm ready to go.
Right. Well, it amazes me because, let's see, how many attorneys have we got on the board? 2? Now, I know one attorney is desperately trying to figure out what in the world's going on.
He is.
He's got the JD, and he's earned his PhD in political science from Texas Tech, I believe it was.
And he wants to understand this thing.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm just gonna recap. We've got a woman that owns a public relations company. I don't know what her educational background is. But it's not-
Kingsville.
it's
He's
not-
got something from
Yeah,
Kingsville.
okay. Then I don't know what Miss Messberger's got. Then there is an attorney there. I think her name is what, Hutchison?
She's the one that asked Dr. Sloan, we weren't surprised by the budget surpluses, right? Well, you should have
It
been.
should have been, okay. And then let's see, I'm just gonna go down, folks, I'm not shy, they can fire me any time of the day or night. Mr. Rivas is a photographer.
Mhm.
Okay. And then we've got Mrs. Estrada, and she's I think she may have an EDD and educate, I think she was a school administrator somewhere.
High school.
High school administrator. And then we've got Mr. McCampbell, who claims a BBA and an expert in accounting.
I believe he's
He
got
said
an
that-
MBA. MBA
Has he got an
accounting.
MBA? Okay.
It is an MBA in accounting. I've heard him say that. And I heard him make reference to the fact that he was once an auditor.
Yeah,
So he's basically got the same education, same background I have.
yeah. Without the CPA
That's not
and the
a
experience.
little different experience.
Okay, well, let's see. Dr. Nick Adami is a chiropractor. And then we've got Mr. Boggs, who's an architect. And I don't think we've left anybody out. So there's no, other than the president of the board, Mr. McCampbell, then the rest of them are clueless as to what all this means.
They don't have the education, they don't have the experience. Now, do they have the fiduciary responsibility to understand this? Well,
I would think they'd have somebody that could explain it.
at 80, 90 million bucks a year, I would hope. Now, that's probably why you hire the right people in the right positions.
Right.
So, and I've been concerned about the qualifications of the CFO forever.
Oh, yeah. Well,
Um,
I have too when you came up through the ranks, but I won't discuss that.
And then the research that you and I did on the accounts receivable, some of the documentation I found there that Mr. Johnson had generated
Mhm.
or had approved gave me grave concern.
Right.
So,
Well, there was one letter, I think, where they said, oh, well, we can't find any information about this in the file drawer, so we'll just write it off.
and it was generated by someone and approved by Mr. Johnson. It shocked me. Now, when you have what I would consider as not strong academically
Mhm.
qualified people in those positions,
Right.
then you would look for some kind of offset in the internal control system that would compensate for that,
Yeah.
like an internal auditor. Now, that has been non-existent, to the best of my knowledge, since 2007 maybe.
Mhm. So,
And so there's no internal auditor. We've got, Sachs says we've got a weak CFO, and based on his analysis of what I spoke about,
mhm.
I would say he's a weak CFO.
Yeah.
And Mr. Johnson All I can say about him is he probably has an accounting degree, but with a degree that hasn't passed the CPA exam, I don't know what that means.
Right.
I've seen some of his work, and it's
Yeah,
unusual.
it's just unusual. That's a good term for it. Okay.
It's not the quality that I'm used to. But here we've got the college administration telling the professors, who happen to be the heart of the college, that there's a budget crisis and there's no money for raises for a 6-year period, and apparently nobody's asked any questions about it.
Well, I think through the faculty council, they have asked, but it's the same old circular reasoning. You know, I was involved in that one year, and I said, well, go over there and tell them you want a 50% raise. And they said, no, we can't do that. And I said, well, something stinks here, and we're being led astray. And, you know, I can't get, this is going to make some of the faculty members mad over there, but folks, you've got to speak up. I mean, you can't just sit there like a lump on a pickle.
Well, no, you've got a choice. If you're happy with getting paid less than the high school teachers in CCISD, which is in the bottom 25% of the state academically,
That's right.
if you're happy as a college professor being paid less than them, don't say anything.
Well, and then we looked up the statewide, and Del Mar College full professors are making 33% less than the entire state average.
Than the average.
The
average.
Yeah.
Now, the average professor, that's going to be at Saul Ross University out there in the middle of nowhere. They probably aren't really highly paid,
Right.
but you're paid less. And it's all because of this, the budget crisis, that I can't find.
There is no crisis.
There wasn't one.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk about who's responsible for that, because somebody has responsibility here.
Okay.
Now, it's my impression that if I've been a CFO, I've been Executive Vice President of Finance, Chief Financial Officer, Chief Accounting Officer. I've done those things. If I were to have done this, it would be my fault, and I would be history.
Right.
If I have these kind of numbers and come up with that kind of conclusion, there's something seriously wrong with my analysis.
Yeah.
So the CFO has the responsibility.
Right.
Now, who reports to him that comes up with these numbers? I think Mr. Johnson probably is in charge of the budgeting process that accumulates all the numbers, but I don't think that he has any authority over it.
I don't know.
I guess I don't either. The only time I see him up there is when he announces there's a budget surplus, and it's almost as if that's a good thing. But let me make it real clear. If Del Mar has a surplus, we've been overtaxed.
That's right.
And
Taxpayers out there.
And if you're generating $35 million, as an example, in ad valorem taxes, and you're generating a net income of $10 million, that's about 30% overtaxed to me.
That's right.
And I don't pay much in property taxes, so it doesn't impact me much. But there's a couple of refineries that pay a whole bunch of money.
Yeah.
And I think when they get my analysis, which they will be getting, that they might see the same thing I'm seeing.
Right.
So, but I diverted it a little bit there. So if I were the CFO and I generated these kind of numbers and came up with that conclusion that there was a budget crisis for a 6-year period, I wouldn't have lasted 6 years.
No.
And so somebody
6 months.
Somebody would have gotten some insight and said, well, if we've got a crisis, why are we generating so much cash and so much net income?
Right. Well, that's the reason that, you know, I'm very pleased to have been selected as the president of the Taxpayers Association, because now I've got somebody that can back up what a lot of us have had suspicions for, or with for a long time. And it just burns me up if they're overtaxing me. I'd much rather have that money for me to go to Jamaica or, you know,
Well, over a
you
5-year
know,
period,
re-roof my house or something.
that may have been $1,000 for you over a 5-year
Oh, I'm
period.
sure it will. I'd much rather have that.
But I think for somebody like Sitco, it might have been a whole lot more than that.
Well, I know that Delmar always participates when they give these tax incentives and what do they call it?
Abatements?
Abatements. And that's, as far as I'm concerned, if a company truly wants to come in here and be part of the community and so forth, they ought to be willing to pay the taxes.
I've got real strong feelings on that. And we might look at the Las Brisas thing as an example.
Well, when we had one of our now Board of Regents members, okay, Mrs. Scott, who owns a public relations company, okay, and when her husband, Mark Scott, who's a city councilman, and also a title company person, he's part of the real estate cartel, okay, it was brought up that they were all gung-ho to get Las Brisas in here, didn't care what the environmental effects were. But Mr. Scott sat there on the council when it came up for tax abatements, knowing that his wife was making money as their PR person, and he voted for the tax abatements. He just should have recused himself, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, you know, I believe there's some felony trials going on up in the Houston area related to that.
Yeah.
And I suspect, there could be some interesting testimony during this felony criminal trial, because they have admitted to, apparently they admitted to embezzling $1.2 million or so. They admitted to it civilly, and they made some arrangement with the company, but now they're being charged criminally and prosecuted, and that could be some very interesting testimony.
Right. Well, you know that happened too with the two people that were with Chase Energy that were accused of.
Those are the ones.
Oh, the ones you're talking
Yeah,
about?
yeah, they're being tried in Houston, I believe.
Yeah.
So, you know, maybe you don't know. Birds of a feather, what do they hang with?
They flock together.
You know, I try to pick my clients so that I have high quality clients.
Right.
I don't want a client that ultimately I have to go in and testify about, particularly in a criminal proceeding.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if they took money, was that the only crime they committed? Taking money from their employer?
Well, I wasn't put on this face of this earth to judge other people, but if I had to take a guess, and I was pressured with it, I'd say you better keep an eye on it, folks.
So there could be some interesting testimony coming out of those trials.
Well, I have had some people from Dallas that were interested in another power plant in Plano, I think it was, that called me about that, because I think those people were also involved in the one that they're trying to get through in Plano. As the city council is opening that polluting power plant with open arms.
Really?
Yeah, I think it's going to be coal-fired.
That's a nice part of Dallas, or it used to be.
Close enough.
My goodness.
So they were reporters out of Dallas, so I gave them the information that I, could provide with the Las Brisas debacle and so forth.
Well, so we've got integrity problems with the,
But when you look at the Sachs review, then our president indicated that they demonstrate 100% plus integrity.
okay, now I have trouble reconciling that, because that is integrity. I'm sure they can't see that, but it's on the internet. Integrity, one of the core values in your financial statements. That's the Delmar financial statement. Okay, so we've got integrity as one of our core values, and then we're generating tens of millions of dollars on an annual basis of what is essentially net income. revenue minus expenses equals net income. So, we've got tens of millions of dollars being generated in net income, and the professors are told there's no money for raises
Right.
for about 6 years.
Mhm.
How does that reconcile to the integrity as a core value?
I think the term is diametrically opposed.
Ah, that's the intersection of the concentric circles?
Yes, it is.
So, let's go back to who is actually responsible for, and I termed it a debacle.
Mhm.
And I said a $60 million debacle. And the question remains, who's responsible for that? I think if I were CFO, I would be responsible. But I report to someone, and he probably has the fiduciary responsibility to make sure I'm not feeding him a line of garbage.
Mhm.
And this is a blatant line of garbage.
Well, I think Truman, old Harry Truman, President Truman summed it up best. He said, you know, the bottom line is the buck stops on my desk because I am the President of the United States.
So, the president's got the ultimate responsibility. He's got both the authority and the responsibility.
And he should be informing the entire Board of Regents and red flagging them when this kind of stuff happens.
I think so as well, because he sits right there at the right hand of the left hand of the board chairman. And he runs the day-to-day operations. The board does not.
Mm.
Now the board needs to have information that informs them, and they've got a fiduciary responsibility to get that information, I believe.
Right.
Since this award-winning comprehensive annual financial report,
Mhm.
that is a published document, and we download the PDFs.
Yeah.
It costs $0. You can search it if you got searching software. So it's certainly available. I mean, all the information I extracted was publicly available.
Right.
And my name's not on that award-winning comprehensive annual financial report, and all of their names appear in there. I would think if my name appeared on there, they should know as much as I know, certainly.
Right.
I'm simply a taxpayer.
Right. Well, I have upset people, made them very uncomfortable and fearful when I indicate that the board is there to hire a president that can take over the college operation and the administration. And the administration of Del Mar College, their only function, ladies and gentlemen, is to provide professors and the other workers with what they need to take care of students. That's the bottom line. It's not over there to go to another fluffy political meeting. It's not a free breakfast. All that president is hired to do is to provide the instructors with what they need to teach students, period.
Okay. So let me say a couple of more things.
Okay.
We can't find the budget crisis. There doesn't appear to be one.
No, there
That
isn't.
never appears to have been one.
Mm-mm.
There is a crisis, though. Between 2010 and 2015, Del Mar lost over 18% of their students.
Right.
Their enrollment declined over 18%.
Mhm.
Now, during that time, Del Mar generated a lot of net profit. Their equity increased dramatically, but their student count went way down. Now, I think it got a little bump this time.
I think about 500 students.
I think so. Well, it's the first upturn we've had in years.
Well, hey, hallelujah.
We will investigate and see if it's all attributed to the dual credit people that don't even step foot on campus.
Right.
We'll do that investigation a little later. But they did get a little bump, but we still had, for this 5-year period, basically over an 18% decline.
Mhm.
So we've got what I call is an integrity issue. When you tell the professors there's no money for raises,
Right.
and you're really generating incredible amounts of net profit?
Well, it's when you tell the taxpayers that you're in a financial crunch and you can't hire and compensate your employees to a level that's over. I mean, when I was shocked, I've never worried about the total compensation for me. Okay? But when I find out that my pay here, as much as I've done for this college, and I'm not bragging, folks, everybody can tell you that. But when I find out that I'm paid 33% less than the average professor in the state of Texas, then I'm concerned. I've been ripped off.
And let me throw this out. I think there may be a correlation between the non-increase in salaries, the low pay, and the declining enrollment.
Sure.
I think there's a direct correlation there.
Mm-hmm.
We've got this, I'll call it an integrity issue, with saying that we've got a financial problem
Mm-hmm.
when there really isn't one. A lot of people, or a lot of institutions would like to have this kind of budget crisis.
Oh, yeah.
And these numbers are incredible. If this were a corporation, we'd be buying stock.
Yeah.
So there is no budget crisis, there never has been.
Right.
Maybe the budget numbers are wrong, and maybe they're way wrong.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like somebody keeps approving a budget that generates more revenue than expenses to the tune of 8 digits a year.
Mm-hmm.
Over 10 million extra dollars a year for the last 3 years.
Yeah.
Over 10 million. So let's look back to this integrity thing. Right.
Well,
how does that reconcile?
well, it doesn't.
I can't make it reconcile.
No.
Right.
Well, anyway, and then I think when we film again, I would like to get into these, this controversy these days that's been brought up by the board finally, concerning the contracts for architectural.
Now, I'm glad you brought that up. I just want to mention, I know a couple of guys over there that are custodians, and hard workers, not a good job, but these people, they used to do that work.
Well, they're now porters.
They got kind of fired from that job.
Mm-hmm.
So what they were replaced with was this firm out of Ohio, I believe.
Yeah, it's GCA Custodial Services.
Okay, so we're operating on basically a $90 million or so a year annual budget. And there's this contract with GCA that pays $1 million a year, a little bit more,
Plus.
just round numbers, it's called $1 million, to clean, to custodial.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's more than 1% of the budget
That's right.
to do the custodial work.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're going to do is, we're going to get a copy of that contract first,
Yeah.
but then we're going to do the analysis. Somebody had to do a cost-benefit analysis
Right.
before they said $1 million is a good deal.
Mm-hmm.
So what I want to see is how much more than $1 million was it costing, was it costing Del Mar College before they signed this contract?
Right.
Because if it wasn't costing more than $1 million, why would they pay more than 1% of their total revenues for custodial work?
Well, I'm gonna stick my neck out and tell you, we had a director of purchasing, okay? And he and the, I think the now CFO were the ones that negotiated that contract and went to the president of the board and said, this is a much better deal than these full-time citizens of Corpus Christi, Texas, with families, and they do have a pension, or not a pension, but they've got health care and they've got a retirement plan. Okay? Now, the custodian that was in my building for years, he was terminated 2 weeks before he was eligible for his retirement. 2 weeks, Ed.
Who would do that? Who would do that to a guy that's been there a long time?
Well, they don't care, but anyway, that director of purchasing was found out later. He's the one that pushed the GCA services out of Ohio. He is roaming around. I have people who have taken pictures of his RV with the $80,000 BMW convertible that's being dragged behind, and they looked up that serial number and the model of that motorhome, and it is a $750,000 rig that the man is driving around, and he has professed. I've got people out of Kansas, of all people, okay, that met him in Colorado, and he is bragging that he is the main consultant and the guy that's going around the country soliciting people to use GCA services out of Ohio. And he's still consulting with Del Mar College on some other issues.
Oh my Lord.
So I'm gonna ask to see how many dollars.
Let's
has
get
been
the
paid.
checks on that one. Wow.
So, as they say, you know, you pay me now or pay me later, Del Mar.
Well, we're gonna look into that one.
And then you're
Can
gonna
we-
spend thousands and thousands of dollars suing the Attorney General to keep information away from me. Every time I file a Public Information Act request.
Now, a lot of things just aren't making a bit of sense here, aren't you?
Well, if you look at it from a perspective of being an honest and trustworthy taxpayer, okay, then when you look at some of this from that point of view, it does not make sense. But if you look from the other perspective, then it's probably going to make total sense in the end.
We may have an abuse of power here.
I think it's a gross abuse of power.
Well, and it's, Del Mar's a big deal to Corpus,
Oh, yeah?
but very few people pay attention to it.
Well, we've got over $1 million a year in custodial, and those poor people that are working for GCA custodial services are not full-timers. They have no benefits, okay, they don't have a retirement plan, and they're paid minimum wage.
So you're gonna have high turnover,
They
poor
have
quality work.
I mean,
As opposed to the people that we knew
right.
that took pride in their work.
And the same thing happens with the grounds.
You know, I've been over to the grounds, and then I went to a game at the University of Houston a week or so ago, and I said, my goodness, what a dramatic difference.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not like Del Mar doesn't have the cash to take care of that stuff.
Right.
Right?
Well,
The parking lots.
Okay. Let me throw this into the mix so that the taxpayers out here understand what's going on. I'll go back to custodial. About a year ago, I had people from the gymnasium over there, the kinesiology department, okay? They came to me, and it was during a board meeting. So I took the then interim director of physical facilities with me, because they said that the women's room, at the showers and stuff over there, okay, they had mold all over it, and it was a stinking mess, water leaking and so forth, okay? So they said, since you're an expert on things like that, microbial growth and so forth, then would you please go over here and look at it? So I said, certainly I would. So I went over there, and they had mold all over the grout, they had mold even on the tiles, and then they had the curtains that were in the different shower stalls. They were molded, and they had fallen off the rings, and they were laying in the floor in a pool of water. So that triggered a why wasn't GCA custodial making people over there in the gym aware that the women's room was that bad? the locker room. And you know what they said? Okay. GCA said, well, it's not in our contract to clean the tiles and so forth, or keep the curtains. So what we're gonna do, if we have to go over there and correct this nasty problem, okay? I mean, I wouldn't send a hog in there to take a shower. Then they wanted more money because that wasn't in the contract.
Got a change order.
So what I did was I looked up the contract, and it did say that thou shalt scrub the toilets, and you go ahead and you're gonna take the mold and stuff off the tile and keep the curtains up.
Approximately, when was this?
That's about a year and a half ago.
Okay, let me just say it, August 31st, 2014.
Say 2013.
Okay, in 2013, your cash balances at Del Mar that were not restricted were 34 million, and they increased 10 million more for 2014.
Yep.
So you had 34 to 44 million dollars in cash that you could have done something with, other than allowing things to get moldy.
Or, yes, or you could have gone ahead, if when it got out of hand like that, which is GCA custodial problem, neglect, okay? Then what they could have done was go over there and say, clean it up, we're not paying you a nickel for this, and if you don't clean this stuff up and start performing, then
That's a breach.
adios, sign on.
And
And then, how many times have I filmed the tree limbs in the middle of the sidewalks, putting people's eyes out?
and it's not that, there's plenty of money to take care of it.
But did you know that with that contract for the groundskeepers, they told Del Mar College that if they have to go trim trees and keep people from putting their eyes out when they walk down the sidewalks, okay, particularly at night, and having those big palm fronds almost hitting the sidewalk on 3 sidewalks outside of ours, and having trash everywhere, and untrimmed grass, that wasn't in the contract, that cost more money. So that's why we see a difference in the billing every month.
And I wonder, well, it kind of makes you wonder, who negotiated this?
Well, I know exactly who negotiated.
What is their background that we're getting these terrible contracts, paying 1% of the gross revenue for cleaning the toilets, and the shower stall doesn't get cleaned?
Well, it's probably the same one that put $1.24 million into advertising over there, as if nobody in the world knows where Del Mar College is in the Corpus Christi community.
And let me tell you how effective that 1.2 or 1.4 million was. And it's annual. That's an annual.
Mm-hmm.
So in the last 5 years, they spent at least $5 million advertising.
Right. For a decrease of...
And we've declined 18+% in student enrollment. If you advertise, and this is just my speculation, if you advertise and refuse to pay your professors, it's probably a waste of money.
Mm-hmm.
Who are you going to attract down here when you come to Corpus and teach at Del Mar? We're only 33% below the Texas state average for colleges, but we're only slightly below CCISD's bachelor level
Right.
teachers.
And
That's a tough sell.
certainly Gregory Portland, they're a little bit higher than
That's
CCISD.
a really tough sell.
Mhm. So taxpayers out there, pay attention.
We need people to go out and vote. We need good people in the members of the board. We need the taxpayers to put pressure on their board members to not allow this sort of thing to happen.
Mm-hmm. Exactly right.
And it needs to be severe pressure, because this is horrible.
Well, one thing I really do, Ed, is I appreciate you jumping in there with me, and finally I see the light.
Well,
I couldn't have done this alone, folks. I mean, I don't know, I can balance a checkbook, but that's as far as my accountabilities can go. And when I'm 33% lower paid than most of the average people, professors in the state of Texas,
It's not that hard to balance.
It's not that hard to balance, no. There are not that many zeros in there.
Well, I like audited financial statements because you've got a CPA that's, the financials belong to the college.
Right.
In fact, Dr. Sloan signs a representation letter that they are his numbers.
That's right.
But the auditors go in there and test them. So we know they've been tested. There could be some errors in there, but we know they've been through an audit, and that gives me some comfort, so I just use their numbers.
Right.
I'm not creating any of my own numbers because, quite honestly, I tried to get 7 general ledger detail accounts once,
Right.
and the estimated bill was
6.7
$26.7 million.
in 120 years.
Yeah, so I'm too old for that and way too broke for that one.
How long would it take you to go through 105 million documents?
See, then it'd be another 100 years. So it just,
Oh,
I can't afford to create my own numbers, so I have to use theirs.
my.
And then I think Dr. Sloan attacked the numbers I was using.
Yes, he did.
And
I sat there and watched him.
I am so confused on him attacking his own numbers. It's a strategy I had never thought of.
Yeah.
But, Doctor, I guess we've run over a little bit.
Well, that's fine.
We'll put this all on YouTube
Okay.
and cut some of it down to TV.
Okay. Well, we'll just, I enjoy it, Ed.
Thank you, sir.
I can't tell the audience how much I appreciate you bailing my incompetency with accounting out.
Well, when you're right, and it's sometimes it's a lonely feeling when you're the only one in the room that's right, but now there's 2 of us.
Yeah. And climbing.
Thank you, Doctor.